every company has culture. You either have it by design or default. So our thesis is that leaders need to be thoughtful and intentional, and in this moment actually need to manage and cultivate and refine their cultures in this moment.
In this edition of The Color Between the Lines, I'm speaking with James and Krista White, a father-daughter duo who's helping leaders rethink how they build company culture. In their new book, Culture Design, How to Build a High-Performing, Resilient Organization with Purpose, explores how to intentionally create a workplace where people feel valued, included, and inspired. We'll talk about empathy, generational change, and what it really takes to design culture on purpose, not by default. Well, James, your first book, Anti-Racist Leadership, it really challenged executives to confront bias in business. And now culture design, it kind of feels like the next step, focused on what comes after awareness. What made this the right time to write this, and what changed in the leadership conversation since your first book came out?
I think there's a couple things, Esther, and I think you summed it up perfectly. This book too is really a zoom out to a bigger picture, that embodies all the foundational principles of our book one. And book two was really an outcome of all the hundreds of conversations and thousands of people that we talked about completing the first book. And we said one of the things that is missing, especially in this really complex, very challenging moment, is leaders that are intentionally thinking about the culture they create. The premise of our book, Culture Design, is really every company has culture. You either have it by design or default. So our thesis is that leaders need to be thoughtful and intentional, and in this moment actually need to manage and cultivate and refine their cultures in this moment.
Krista?
We're really excited to get to share this book with audiences. I mean, have already gotten such great feedback on culture design, and both in how accessible it is to a wide range of leaders at different levels and cross-functionally, but also that it is full, like jam pack of all these frameworks and real world examples from Dad's career, from the amazing CEOs and other executives that we interviewed for the book, colleagues in the past. We just think that culture is just going to be something that is a huge differentiator going forward in this time of really so much turnover, so much difficulty attracting or retaining great candidates. It's going to be more important than ever for the longevity of people's organizations.
Well, I'm going to follow up, Krista, with someone who may not understand what those two words, culture design, what that means, because it almost sounds like architecture, like it's an architectural book, culture design.
Mm-hmm.
How would you explain what it means to intentionally design culture inside an organization?
Yeah. So like Dad said, our kind of premise for the book is that culture exists no matter what. It's either by design or by default. Who do you want creating your culture within your organization? The leaders, the CEOs, the senior leadership, or it exists in a vacuum. It's created by what you are not doing intentionally. So we really do think of culture design as that architecture point, or as design thinking, product design. We do think about those frameworks of how do you think of culture iteratively? How do we think of it as not some sort of separate check the box activity, but as integrated fully throughout the organization and with the strategy? Culture should always tie back to strategy. And one of the things we really think about a lot, and this relates to our interests in design thinking, is starting with empathy always. And that's how we create these people first companies, is by starting with empathy, starting with the people who make the company run. The company doesn't exist without your employees. So getting back to basics and then finding ways to routinize systems and rituals that continuously drive culture, top to bottom and across the organization.
Well, I'm going to follow up with that because you talked about empathy, and James, you write that empathy is not just about being soft. It's about being strong enough to kind of lead with understanding. How do you model that kind of empathy while still holding people accountable for results?
Yeah, I'd make a couple points, Esther. I think we talk a lot about listening with an open heart. Um, you bring an open mind, and uh, I think from a leadership perspective, it's really about humanizing yourself as a leader, which we believe creates even greater followership. So we've got lots of examples in the book. One personal example that we shared, we do this exercise with executives where they will take a white sheet of paper and kind of draw a line horizontally. And if you think about, and if Esther, even if you thought about for yourself the highs and lows in a career or a life, and what's similar and different, the highs and the lows, and sharing that in ways. We have executives to do that collectively, and you and I might share dancing in common, or love for jazz, or a loss of a family member, or some illness. But anything that humanizes the executives and teams, it creates an environment where there are just much greater opportunities to for us to bring our full selves to the job, and then do our really our best work. But we view empathy as a core capability of this next generation of leaders, and we think the best companies epitomize that. Um, so yeah, empathy critically important. The book is kind of anchored around that as a key premise for the book.
Well, Krista, I want to follow that up with, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is DEI and the current climate around it, and how there's a really like a big pushback right now, especially in terms of words like woke, used to dismiss anything that's tied to inclusion, to belonging. Were you concerned that this book might be facing, I guess, resistance just because of that topic? And how did you talk about culture design in a way that really just keeps people from being kind of boxed into politics?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of our biggest reasons for broadening our purview on culture and at a systemic level. We do feel that this pushback against DEI or woke or anti-racism is noise. Uh, we always encourage clients and people we work with to just get down to what matters to you as a company. What are your values? Have those changed? How you think about people, has that changed? We hope to get people to focus on, and it's back to this point about humanizing each person, and humanizing yourself as a leader. Uh, and that also ties to the importance of strategy and systems. So one of the things that we have seen in culture, be it in DEI specific initiatives or other types of culture transformations, is that the culture work is almost siloed. And it's like, okay, HR is doing this thing. And that's one of the things that we really strongly believe is culture must be led by the CEO. This work doesn't get cascaded throughout the organization without that senior level and executive level buy-in. You won't have the capacity as an organization to really embed this work without that. I think that's a piece that's missing, is this cross functionality of culture design.
James, I'm wondering if you had anything to add to that, especially since there's, word that there's thousands of Black women who have lost their jobs in the corporate world. And many of them are, expressing, especially when you look on LinkedIn, just they're tired and they don't feel connected and they feel like the leadership has pretty much failed them. What's your response?
I think the main thing for me is I'm certainly understanding and have heard that issue. Most of what I spend my time on, kind of post my operating career, is to level playing fields and create opportunities where we all can do our best work, whether it is my support of Black women on boards. I've got my own nonprofit Directors Academy. This culture work or writing is really all about creating systems and environments and companies that really work for all. And we think with this work on this book, Culture Design, it allows us to zoom out. But really important to the work is this idea of, companies and cultures kind of have to live in the 3D. So we had an executive that we interviewed, Tony Wells, that describes culture is the software that the company runs on. And if you kind of think about it a bit from that perspective and making sure that that software that the company runs on, which is culture and values and the rituals, making sure it works for all. So embedded in all the work that we do and all the conversations that we have around culture and culture design is making sure that it works for all of us, inclusive of Black women. So we have a lot of heart for the challenges that people are facing today. And back to your question related to DEI, I'm a firm believer of not letting the words get in the way of the good work that people are doing. Some people were never committed to any of that work, from the start. But the best leaders that we know, and many of the leaders, really all the leaders that we talk to for this book, inclusion is kind of built into the DNA of how they operate as leaders. And that's what we loved about how they build culture and shared stories with us about culture. I'll share, one of my favorite examples. We interviewed the CEO of Bolthouse Fresh, Timothy Escamilla. And Timothy and I had known each other in the industry. He's a third, fourth generation, immigrant, and his grandfather and father worked in the fields that ultimately he became CEO of one of the companies where his family had told and worked. And we love that story. And one of the ways that he humanizes both himself and focuses on his team, the first place he stops when he's touring the fields is he goes to the bathroom and he says, is that bathroom clean enough for me to use? And if it's not, it tells him something about the culture and what's happening there. And we just thought that was so fitting, and kind of his history and the empathy that he brings was just magical in the conversation we had with him. The other point he made is that as CEO, every one of my employees deserves at least 5 minutes of my time, because I might change the trajectory of their I'm busy, but I might change the trajectory of their day.
Hey, if this conversation resonates with you, please take a second to subscribe to the Color Between the Lines podcast and the YouTube channel. Your support really helps us share more conversations that connect with leadership, inclusion, and the power of authentic storytelling. Now let's get back to the conversation.
With the question they stopped to ask me as I'm walking around, and we've got those kind of stories embedded in the book, and it's firmly what we care a ton about.
Well, Krista, I was hoping that you could talk about seeing that you're working with your dad. It's a different generation, your generation versus his generation. And I wondered if some of the things that you found with interviews and putting this get together this book, there were some, highlights that kind of really spoke to how younger generations view leadership and workplace culture.
Yeah, I mean, just working together has really been a cool, like, sort of um, tension in terms of point of view, not end goal. So we all, I know me and dad like have the same end goal, but make a better world for all, and through a corporate perspective, but through every aspect of our lives. And there was just little different things of like how we even identify ourselves in the world that came up through the writing of this book. And some of the best leaders that we spoke to are really sensitive to the generational differences in their organizations. So example we like to talk about a lot is Carla Vernone, the CEO of the Honest Company, uh, uses Inside Out, the Pixar movie, and some other of those Disney and Pixar movies to kind of create a scale of for quick check-ins of like, okay, are you sadness? Are you envy? Where are you today in terms, and that's like been a change management tool for her that's very accessible and easy. And that's an example also of a ritual that it's those small things in the day to day that make add up to the biggest difference. Um, so yeah, and one of the ways that we talk about the intergenerational learning in the book or kind of illustrate that is we have these pull-out notes there, from Krista's notes app and from James's notepad. Um, and there's a fun interplay in those and almost a conversation of what can we all learn from each other, because this is the most generations we've had together in a workplace ever. So there's tension there, but there is so much opportunity to learn from each other. I mean, my favorite examples are, the people who have been there for 20 plus years at a company or in their field have so much amazing knowledge and institutional knowledge to pass down to younger folks. And then Gen Z is teaching us all how to use TikTok on the marketing team and how to make Google Docs easier and automated. So there's so many things where if we could bridge that gap, we get to have a better time at work and a more efficient time together.
How about you, James? What did you learn from your daughter about, and some of the interviews that may have changed your perspective about younger generations?
I just think there's over the course of writing two books together and spending countless hours and many, many interviews, there is an even stronger perspective generationally on what are the values of the organizations that I work for? What's the culture? What's my experience going to be? If I just think about my start, which is 4 decades ago in the work world, I just needed to have a job. I was the first member of my family to graduate from college, so I couldn't be as demanding on needs to be a fantastic culture, needs to work with my values. I just needed to get a job. Um, so that's a generational change with what our relationship is with our work. And I applaud, what I've learned from Krista and folks that sit in that generation. And I think leaders that don't understand that, they do that at their own risk. And we think this generational difference in dynamic is one of the things that has to be accounted for as we're managing through the generations. And I'll give maybe two examples. One of the companies that we um, interviewed for the book, and we've got culture stories from the field, and we've got a half dozen of those that are embedded where there are real stories where we bring to life the full story, not just quotes. And this particular company, Bay Club, which is a lifestyle fitness organization, and I was just with them yesterday and got a chance to uh, pick up my first physical copy of the book, but they were having their annual summit, which is their Polaris summit, and they do something that I think is just beautiful. One of their core values is they always honor the past. So we heard from founders of the various companies that have been bought by Bay Club, and there's just a lot of lessons and wisdom in that. And they've got in that room yesterday, there's 300 of us. There were probably 4 generations in that room, and they found a beautiful way with this. We always honor the past. That's where they start, and then they move forward, and then innovate the company and the culture. They use this annual gathering to acknowledge the past, to really revisit the core values that has made the company strong, and then there are training elements that kind of take them to the future and cascade out. So we think that's just a wonderful example, kind of working across the generations. And then we have a current client that we're in the midst of working with, and we're helping them grapple with how to, in their own words, honor the past, but to continue to innovate and scale and grow. And that's always a challenge and creates a bit of tension inside of companies, and with all the external things that are changing, from AI to all the geopolitical and social issues that leaders and companies are being faced with. It creates a bit of tumult in and outside of the companies that leaders have to get centered around what's most important to us and how do we navigate the future.
Well, my final question for both of you, and I'll have Krista answer it first, and then you can follow up, James, is what is one thing that you want people who pick up this book get from it so that it might help them in the future?
That's a great question. I hope that people who read Culture Design feel empowered to make even one small daily change in their organization, regardless of if they're the CEO or it's their first job out of college. Right now is such an intense, tumultuous time to, well, just be a person, but to be entering the workforce, to be leading an organization. So I hope that there's something that they can grab onto to help with that stability, to help with them feel confident in themselves and in their organizations and in their people.
James?
And for me, Krista and I, as we talk about this between the two of us, we view this work as a love letter to organizations that really want to, build great companies that work for all. So I'll end with an approximation of epigraph that we use to close the last chapter. This, for me, and it really relates a bit to my stage in life. I view myself as a bridge to the future. But there's a quote that we absolutely love that is about planting seeds that'll create trees that'll provide shade that I'll never get a chance to see. So those are the organizations and leaders that we absolutely love. We interviewed a dozen of those kinds of leaders, and we're optimistic even in this challenging time. And we hope Culture Design will be one tool in the toolbox that'll help leaders, move themselves and their organizations to the future.
I want to thank James and Krista White for sharing their insights and their stories on creating strong people-first organizations. Their new book, called Culture Design: How to Build a High-Performing, Resilient Organization with Purpose, is available now on Amazon and wherever books are sold. You could also learn more about their work at culturedesignlab.com. I'm Esther Dillard, and this is The Color Between the Lines.